Hello and welcome to the YYC Soccer Podcast. My name is Jason Kmet and my co-host is Scott Strasser. Hey, Scott.
Are you Jason Kmet or are you Mr. Right all the time?
Yes, well, I was thinking that maybe we should have for this episode title, Jason was right about everything.
Yeah, I think that is the title we should go with. But maybe we should explain to listeners why it is that you're right all the time. Particularly quite recently what you were right about on both counts.
We talked about it in the last episode, but in October, I don't remember exactly what day it was, but I think it was right after they announced the day of the CPL draft. I had predicted about a month or so in advance the exact date that Valor was going to announce their folding, and that was right. And then I also have been talking for quite a long time. I don't know how long ago I've been talking about it, but for quite a long time about how York United is going to be changing their name to Enter Toronto FC. And last week I predicted that was going to happen on Thursday, which is tonight, the night we're recording, and guess what? It happened. So yeah, 2 for 2 on that count. And I don't know. I feel pretty good about these things. Was I the first person to figure out that the Montreal team was going to be called the Supra?
Yeah. Your post about that went pretty viral in the Canadian soccer world. When you pointed out that the trademark was held by the ownership in Quebec. So yeah, you're on a roll. And I know you have some big predictions coming up in tonight's episode that we're going to talk about. So maybe you'll get another correct prediction.
Well, possibly. By the way, when we're on that topic about like trademark stuff, do you see that post I had about how the CPL is trademarking the term icicle kick?
Yeah, I did. That's both not surprising and also a little bit surprising. Before we continue with this episode, I guess we should tell any new listeners out there what our podcast is all about. We obviously do talk quite a bit about the CPL, but that's definitely not our sole focus. So would you mind reading off what exactly the YYC Soccer Podcast is all about?
We talk about soccer in Calgary at the amateur, collegiate, professional levels. We talk about the teams and the players from the community, starting at the grassroots into the amateur leagues and the university and professional levels. So anything to do with soccer in the Calgary region, we try to cover it.
Absolutely. And yeah, we often talk about Cavalry FC and the Calgary Wild, who are the other professional soccer team in the city. Not too much talk about them tonight, Jason, but we do have the CPL draft that we want to go over. And there are a lot of Calgarian university players or university players with deep Calgary connections who have declared for the draft. There are 201 players declared in the draft, a lot of them from Calgary or with deep Calgary connections or playing for Calgary-based universities. I think we'll hear a few of those Calgary names this Friday morning when this episode is released. That's when the draft is taking place. So yeah, maybe we could talk about some of the players from Calgary or with Calgary teams that are in this draft, and maybe we can make some predictions as to who we think may hear their name called, and maybe we'll make some predictions about how Cavalry will base their selections.
Sounds good. Let's dive into that now and talk about Cavalry FC.
Hey, this is Judd Strauss, and you're listening to the YYC Soccer Podcast.
So Cavalry, as usual, have 2 picks in the 18-pick draft, and they're going to have to wait their turn, right? They're going 7th and 14th. So in terms of the top prospects, their name may be already called by the time Cavalry is up, Jason. But yeah, what do you think about who will be on Cavalry's radar this week?
Why don't we start more with talking about the players with Calgary connections who have declared for the draft? Because I put together a bit of a list here, and there are definitely some interesting names. I think some of them are not surprising, and some of them are, well, honestly, not really on my radar screen, but it should be interesting to see which ones get picked. So, yeah, we should maybe talk about some of them.
Definitely. So do you want to go by university program?
Yeah, that might be easiest. There's a lot of Mount Royal players, but let's start off with the University of Calgary Dinos. They've got 4 players that are in the draft: Arash Major, F.A. Udolo Joshua, Hani Shafi, and Kimia Kasanda.
Yeah, and then from the other Calgary-based university, that being Mount Royal, 9 players declared for the draft. No surprise to see Chanan Chanda on that list, complemented by right back Hyunsu Ryu, midfielder Jonathan Walter, defender Joseph Green, forward Luka Patek, midfielder Max Nero, former Cavalry player Skylar Rogers, Tim Beckadal, and then recent podcast guest goalkeeper Sjard Strauss, or Sharky, as he's known.
There are a couple other players that we wanted to mention that don't play at Mount Royal or with the Dinos.
We see players like Emmanuel Dan Adokiani, plays for Trinity Western. He was with Foothills in League One this past season. Quite a few players played with that Foothills team, Jason, including a trio who are with the Cape Breton Capers, those being Amadou Bayo, Harvey Hughes, who was a Cavalry draft pick last year, and Jamie Nicholson.
Yeah, and a couple players from Lethbridge with Calgary connections we thought we'd mention as well. Kyle Boyle, he's from Chestermere. He plays for the Pronghorns. And Xander McIntyre was a Cavalry U21 player last year, and he's put his name in too. So I don't know, what's that, about 20-ish players, I think, with Calgary connections have declared. So about 10% of the whole number overall.
Yeah, I think there's a good chance we'll hear at least one, maybe more of the names that we just rattled off.
The first question I want to ask you, Scott, is that, I think it's a no-brainer that Chanan Chanda is going to get drafted. I'm not going to ask you if you think he's going to get drafted, because I think pretty confident that I think we would agree he would. But how high do you think he would go?
Well, the first 2 picks are FC Supra, and they've made a big point of being a Quebec-first program, right? So I'd be very surprised if their first pick isn't a Quebec-based player. And maybe both of their picks, to be honest, will be from Quebec or Quebec schools. And then we have Vancouver FC with 3rd pick, and then Pacific FC at 4th. So I'd be very surprised if either Vancouver or Pacific did not go with Chanda.
When you talk about Cavalry drafting 7th, I don't think there's really any chance, Chanda will be around by 7th to give Cavalry that option. Although, to be honest with you, I kind of don't really want to see him picked by Cavalry anyway. I think it would be kind of good for him to see how things go in a new environment and see how that would go. But I think he'll be gone by 7.
Yeah, I actually agree with you that as much as I'd like to see Chanda come back to Cavalry, I think deputizing for Toby Warshevsky and filling in behind, he'd probably be up behind Kanij Elva if they're both back in terms of the picking order for striker. And I think if he were with a program like Vancouver or Pacific, he could really help either of them, right? Like Pacific really struggled on the scoring front this past year, and Vancouver seems to have always struggled in the scoring front and every other element of their game. So I think that, Chanda's 19, he's still very young, but I think he's approaching the age where he could really make a difference in the CPL for a particular team. And yeah, I think either Vancouver or Pacific could really use his talents. I wouldn't mind to see him picked 3rd, 4th, or 5th.
Yeah, I'd agree. Cavalry always makes an effort to draft players with local connections. So when you look at last year, Cavalry picked Harvey Hughes and Owen Antoniuk, and Harvey Hughes didn't have a specific connection to Calgary, but Antoniuk definitely did. I don't know. What do you think, Scott? It would be good money to bet that at least one of the picks that Cavalry picks will have some kind of local connection. Any thought on, when you look at this list, any thought of who you think that could be?
Yeah, I agree with you that at least one of the picks is probably going to be from a Calgary school. And I think considering the season that Mount Royal had, you have to assume that that's where they're going to be focusing on. And I think you and I have both talked about this a little bit offline, that we could very well see them go with a recent podcast guest of ours, Sjard Strauss.
I totally think that's who they're going to pick. I think that it just makes too much sense. He had a really great year at Mount Royal. Cavalry is thin at keeper, right? Well, right now, both of their keepers are out of contract, Marco Carducci and Joe Holiday. Now, I would think that they would like to have probably both of them back. But even if they had both of them back, Nevin Fuster was the third string keeper last year, and he's off in university. So I don't know. I think that they're going to need another keeper hanging around. And he's played really well, and he's got some pro experience from his time in Germany when he was before he came to Mount Royal. So I think it's a definite possibility. It's what I think is going to happen. I think you're kind of on the same page.
Yeah, I'm definitely on the same page. I look at some of the other names that I think from Calgary that would be on Cavalry's radar. I do know that they scout the Calgary schools. F.A. Udolu Joshua had a good season for the U of C Dinos, but for the same reason I've already mentioned with Cavalry's striker core already being pretty strong, I don't know if they're going to want to use one of their draft picks on a striker. And that may also rule out Luka Patrick from Mount Royal, who I was impressed by in the 3 games of the Cougars that I saw this past year. But he's also pretty young, right? He's only 19. He was named a Canada West All-Rookie. For those reasons, I feel like Cavalry will probably not be looking for an attack-minded U Sports draft pick.
I think it's going to be Sharky Strauss and some player that we're not expecting, like some player who is not may or may not be related to Calgary, like, kind of like a Harvey Hughes.
Yeah, I agree. And this is kind of contradicting what I just spent like 2 minutes talking about, but in terms of a player who I think Cavalry's coaches will definitely be aware of, Matteo Brezina from Fraser Valley, 2-time Canada West Player of the Year. He scored plenty of goals in the last 2 years in U Sports, playing for a program that doesn't typically go deep in the playoffs. So maybe not be a household name nationally, but from what I can tell, he's a bit too good for U Sports, and that's a player who I expect to be drafted, and he is included in the list of players who declared. But I don't know if he'll be picked before Cavalry gets a chance to do so.
Yeah, like it seems to me like he would be a guy that you would kind of expect might be gone by the time they draft.
Hi, this is Oluwapo Ifai, and you're listening to the YYC Soccer Podcast.
Okay, Scott, since we don't have tons to talk about right now in regards to what's happening, here in Calgary, we thought maybe we turn our attention to some Calgarians that are playing in Europe, and I guess, well, that matter, Australia as well. But how are some local players doing in their overseas adventures?
Yeah, we do this a few times a year. We like to check in and see how some of those Calgarians are doing abroad. We compiled a list of, I think this is 7 or 8 names, Jason, and all 8 of these or 7 of these players have been guests on our podcast. So pretty cool.
Let's run through it. And, we can maybe start with one of the very first guests we ever had.
Yeah, Dominik Zator. He is playing for Arka Gdynia in the Polish First Division. That's the league called Ekstraklasa. He's playing regularly, not a starter every game, but he's made 9 appearances for the team. Altogether has played 665 minutes. I believe Arka Gdynia was a promoted team from the Polish Second Division, and they seem to be holding their own in the top flight, middle of the pack, or at least away from the relegation places, 12th out of 18 teams.
Mm-hmm. And there's another Calgarian that is plying his trade in Poland as well, albeit at a much lower level. Sebastian Zitkowski is currently playing in the Polish 4th Division. Last year, he played with the team in the 4th Division. This year, he's moved to a different team.
Yeah, this team is called Rewalski Rewal, and they're not doing very well. Club is in last place in their division at the moment, but Zitkowski does appear to be starting regularly and has scored 2 goals.
Yeah, so I guess, he is getting a chance to play a bit, but yeah, it doesn't sound like they're having like an awesome season from that standpoint. So who else do we have here? We've got Scott Kennedy. Scott Kennedy was was on last year, and he's currently in the Belgian second division.
Yeah, he's playing for a club called KAS Eupen. They are in 7th place in a division that has 17 teams. That's a very odd number of teams to have in a league. But
it makes me think I did something wrong there that I wrote that.
Oh, okay. I'll just say they're in 7th. They're in 7th at the moment. Kennedy is starting pretty much every game. He's played 12 out of 13 games. And
another player with Calgary connections, Bim Pebble. He's been playing in League One in England for Plymouth Argyle, and seems like he's been playing a fair bit.
Yeah, I think he's got 12 league appearances and then 4 other games in other competitions, including the 2 domestic cup competitions like the FA Trophy or the EFL Cup that Plymouth Argyle are playing in. League-wise, they're not doing too well. They're in 23rd in a 24-team division at the moment. However, 3 teams, including Argyle, are tied on 16 points, and the team above them are on 17 points. So a win for Plymouth Argyle could get them out of the relegation fight. Oh, and Bim Pepple has played 16 games, as I mentioned, and he scored 2 goals.
Let's look at the Albanian League and Bori Falali, right?
Falai, yeah, he is playing for KF Tirana. They're having a really bad season, Jason, dead last in the Albanian top flight. Just 1 win from their first 12 games. However, that 1 win was against their local rival, Partizani, and that was the game that Bori Falai scored in. That's his only goal for Tirana so far, but that's the big derby for KF Tirana, and they're actually going to be playing Partizani pretty soon, next Sunday. So hopefully he'll be able to double his goal tally.
Yeah, I can imagine that team's under a fair bit of pressure. I think they're expected to perform in that league, and that does not sound like the year has been going well. One more player to talk about applying their trade in Europe. That's Kendall Showers, who we've had on a couple times. She's currently playing for a team that is known. Their commonly used name is Santa WFC in the Greek first division.
Yeah, this is a team based in the capital, Athens. I believe, is their formal name Agia Paraskevi WFC?
Correct. I believe there's actually, that is the name of like the club. I think there's actually a men's club associated with that as well. But for whatever reasons, the women's team is known as Santa. But
okay.
Finding detailed stats in the Greek Women's League is a little tough. I know that Kendall scored at least a couple goals, and her team is kind of in about the middle of the pack right now. I do know that they just fired their coach. So clearly the execs weren't happy with their performance. So I don't know if they've hired a new coach yet, but clearly there's been some changes, and I don't know how it's going to ultimately affect her. But yeah, it seems like it's been kind of a bit of a mixed bag this year for that team.
Yeah, but she appears to be playing pretty regularly based on.
Yeah, she's starting more often than not, from what I can tell, and making substitute appearances. Like, I don't think she's, again, from the main way I can tell these things is by following Santa on Instagram, and they always post their starting lineups. And whenever I see their starting lineups, she's usually in them, not always in them. So for what that's worth.
Fair enough. Okay, and we've got one other player to mention playing abroad, Willie Accio, former Cavalry player. He's playing with the Marconi Stallions in the Australian Championship. That's the second division in Australia, and they're in the midst of a playoff run, aren't they, Jason?
Yeah, like I want to talk about this because I think it's kind of interesting. At least I think it's interesting. So the way the Australian lower levels, the non-A league levels, they have like state leagues. So every state has a league, and Akia was playing for one of the better teams in the Australian Capital Territory League, which is where Canberra, the capital, is. He had a really good year there. And then what ended up happening is once the season ended, he got picked up by Marconi Stallions. And they are a long-time, big-time team in Australian soccer. I think they have their own stadium, like, that has like 5,000 seats in it. Like, they're a pretty big operation for a team at that level. Yeah, what they're doing right now is some of those top teams have sort of banded together, and they're having a national second division after their state league, and they signed him to play in that. So he's been playing for that team, and yeah, they've made it all the way to the semifinals.
Yeah, they won their quarterfinals match recently. Their semifinal is just a few days from now, I guess Saturday, that will be. And yeah, Willie is very prominent on social media, so I'd encourage you to follow him because he's been posting a lot in recent days as the team has enjoyed this playoff run.
Thank you for listening to the YYC Soccer Podcast. You can have this podcast downloaded to your device as soon as it becomes available by subscribing on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or other platforms. Check out our website at yycsoccer.com, where you can look through our episode archive and find other options to listen, including our YouTube channel. We also have links there so you can buy Scott's book. It's all about the history of pro soccer in Calgary. It's called Here Come the Cavalry. You can leave a question or comment in the Contact Us section of our website. You can also interact with us on social media such as Twitter, Instagram, or Blue Sky, where our username is YYC Soccer 403. Thanks for listening.